this voice I'm working through is I'm at the end of a 7-day sinus and throat cold. So this is hot water with lemon, and I'm hoping that keeps my voice working throughout the entire thing, but this is about as much of a voice as I have. I hope all of you are in better shape and can avoid that, the sickness that's going around this year. I'm going to go right ahead and just give you a quick summary, some of the things that were mentioned there. The thing that I want to stress is that I have a very unique experience in the sense that I have actually lived through both a physical and a mental illness, and that's given me an enormous amount of perspective when it comes to the way we all react to illness and how differently we react to physical and mental illness. And I'll go through that. I'll explain later what why I founded my company and even why I wrote the book. But this is speaking out and sharing my story is something I've been doing since 2006. I started doing it as a volunteer speaker for AMI Quebec. And that was my way of giving back to them because I had attended their mood and thought disorders course when I was suffering with bipolar disorder. And that was in fact the way that I really began to learn what mental illness really even was. Up until that point, I didn't understand it very well. And regarding the book is a part memoir and part how-to. I really learned an enormous amount throughout my journey facing this and then living through it afterwards. And the thing about it was I was actually diagnosed with bipolar in 2005, but I published the book just last May. And so the book actually has a lot of content in it that I learned way later. And I wrote it in, as I say, it's sort of part remembrance and storytelling, and this is what happened, and part of it is this is what I learned from it. I wrote the book to try to help anyone who is facing this, whether you're a caregiver or you're an individual who actually has an illness. I know that when I was at the beginning stages, I could have used a book like this and just been able to learn more from it, and that was my motivation to write the book and to get the book out there. It does dive deep into my personal story beyond what I will share with you tonight, and again, just offers insight on how we perceive mental illness and what we can do to change that. So a couple things, I'm going to be talking a lot about some pretty dark things that I went through and some of the more difficult experiences that I had. So I wanted to start off with some fun stuff about me that you might like to know. The first one is golf. That is what I do all summer long as much as I possibly can. It's my favorite hobby. My wife and I love to do that. And when we're not doing that, we try to travel as much as we possibly can. That picture was taken in Mexico in the middle there. And when it's winter time and I have sinus colds and I can't golf because there's no open golf courses, I curl. I'm very lucky that I'm a member of one club that is both a golf and a curling club, so I'm able to be active like that all year long. And curling's a funny thing, 10 years ago, if you told me that I would curl, I would have laughed. I would have thought, no, I would never do that. But it's just as addictive as golf. It's a great sport and very social and very fun. I'm also a member of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. So I have been working as a professional speaker since 2014. From 2006 to 2014, it was all volunteer, like this is tonight. And where I got my aptitude for public speaking, it was just a fluke, really. Some people when they're young, they identify as an athlete or as a musical prodigy or something, like they have latent skills that are just there. I was a terrible athlete. I'm horrible at music. I cannot sing. Even when my voice is normal, I can't hold a tune. But for whatever reason, public speaking was always really easy for me. Even when I was a little boy, even in grade 4, I remember presenting to my entire school, and my dad was in the audience he hates public speaking. And he joked, he was like, who the hell is that kid? This is not mine. So I don't know why, but I've always enjoyed public speaking, and the theater masks there are to let you know that I actually pursued that in university. I have a degree in theater and speech communication. So I spent 4 years sort of crafting that skill. And so when it came time to stand up and start sharing my story, the actual delivery part was the easiest part for me, interestingly enough. So let's go to my path of discovery, really how I went through to just learn what I've learned. And I mean, most of it was stumbling in the dark and figuring things out after the fact. But really, I had a lot of self-reflection as a result of the things I did well, but also the things I did really poorly, and the mistakes that I made. And my hope is to use those experiences to help others to maybe fast-track their own experiences and avoid some of the mistakes and pitfalls that I made. When I was going to be a professional speaker on this topic, I realized that I needed to learn from an academic level a little bit more about how mental illness is impacting the workplace, how stigma is impacting the workplace, because the majority of my clients from my company are employers, corporations or schools who have people that they have to take care of, and they're recognizing that mental illness is not something that they're addressing very well. So I did a lot of academic research, and then I have also developed a set of key takeaways. So at the end of this, there's actually 10 insights that I'm going to share that are sort of the most important things I learned along the way, and that'll be a nice way for you to walk out of here remembering the sort of the meat of what I'm trying to share. So my vision for why I even bothered to stand up and start sharing my story, and why, very much so, why I founded my company Stigma Zero and why I'm wearing a shirt that says Stigma Fighter, is I believe we have a chance, if we do it right, that in my lifetime, I am 44 years old right now, in my lifetime, stigma around mental illness can be absolutely eradicated. It's going to take a lot of people doing things like what I'm doing, a lot of people doing things like what you're doing. Learning and talking about it and breaking down those barriers, that's how we're going to get there. And so that's my vision and why I came up with it, and this is the way that I say it. Mental illness can be treated, it can't be cured. It's a lot like cancer. It's not like any one of us could ever go and take either a pill or a treatment or have a surgery and the mental illness will be gone. We don't have that option, but we do have the option to cure stigma. And I'm a great example of that because, as you will learn soon, I used to have a ton of it, towards others and towards myself. So stigma can be cured even in people who really have way more than any of you in this room would have, as an example. So the presentation, any presentation I give, these are my goals. I want you to learn something you don't already know, I hope, or at least maybe add to something that you know a fair bit about. I hopefully can add some color. I want to add to the insight that you might have on a particular topic or a particular challenge that you're facing in this space. And tools, actual ideas, tangible things that could be done differently that I've learned along the way. So those are the things that I'm going to provide before we're done. I would like to just very quickly, hands up or just say it out loud, how would you describe your knowledge of mental illness and stigma? I have a feeling all of you would say very strong. Is that true? Very strong to strong, yeah. Now, many of the times that I'm giving these talks, it's the other way around. The people that I'm giving it to, they really don't know a lot about it and they want to learn. But it's helpful for me to know. What is your experience with mental illness? And again, this is obviously a safe space and I'm going to be sharing a whole lot about my experiences. But if you're comfortable answering this, what is your experience with mental illness? Is it direct, like you've actually lived it, or you've experienced it yourself, or you've seen it in a loved one? Or is it indirect, like kind of a friend, or none? Direct? And indirect would probably be the rest. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. And has anyone in your life experienced a mental illness? I'm gathering mostly yes. Yeah. And if you have been diagnosed with a mental illness, did you feel the stigma? I'm guessing that answer is yes as well. And this is a bit of a trick question because I have literally never had a person who was diagnosed with a mental illness say, no, I didn't feel any stigma. I mean, never, and that's the point. When I make this survey in a group of 500 people, it's pretty staggering to realize that the 50 or so people who are comfortable saying I've been diagnosed, all of them always say, I felt the stigma. Because it's there, it's always there. And we have to change things to get rid of it. So now to the title of my book and the title of this presentation, and I'm going to be sipping from this a lot so that I can keep my voice. All right, why did I call it Jason 1 Stigma Zero? I'd like to share that story with you because it's really cool, and I want to give credit to my friend and business partner. His name's Ryland McKinley. He is co-founder of Stigma Zero with me, and he and I work closely together building this business. We were coming up with, I actually had a title for the book. I had a totally different title that I thought was great, and I'll tell you what it is. Why Stigma is a 4-letter word. It's kind of a play on the 4 was going to be spelled like the way we hide swear words, you know, with ampersands and number signs and stuff. And I thought that was kind of clever, and that was the name of the book for a long time before I published it. And
Can you repeat it? You said it so fast.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Why Stigma is a 4-letter word.
Okay.
as in a swear word, yeah. So that was the play on what I was going to call the book. And Rylan and I were talking about it, and frankly, it was the day that we took the photograph for the cover. We took the photograph for the cover and we realized that photograph needs a different title, because that photograph is very personal, it's very up close, it's very raw, and that's what I wanted out of the photograph. But it made us realize we needed something differently. And Rylan is a sports fan, he's a longtime Habs fan. He thought in sports terms, and he said, well, what about a score? You know, like Jason won Stigma Zero. And here's the funny part. We'd already named the company Stigma Zero. We'd already designed the logos, and he wasn't thinking about Stigma Zero, the company name. He was thinking the score. Jason has 1, Stigma has 0. But when you say it out loud, it just connected, and so it was like the perfect title. And that's why we had it. And really, this is what I'm saying. I have not beaten mental illness. I have not beaten bipolar disorder. But I sure as hell beat stigma. I found a way to get over it, and I'm trying to help others do the same. So I'm sharing my battle with mental illness at home and in the workplace. So, we're going to go back now, because for me to explain how I got to understand what I understand about mental illness and stigma, I actually have to explain the first physical health challenge I ever had, which was when I was 9 years old, and it was a heart defect. So that was the first time that I was introduced to the concept that, hey, my body doesn't work right. And in my case, it showed up in the form of this heart defect. Who remembers this show?
Oh, yeah.
I put that up there because that was the show I was watching. I was 9 years old, I'm in grade 4, I'm sitting on the floor after school, I watched it every day, and it makes me laugh now because half the jokes right over my head because they were very much adult, but I loved it. I thought the show was funny. And one day I'm sitting there and my heart jumped from a resting heart rate to 200 beats per minute.
Holy crap.
Instantly, just boom. And it was going so hard and so fast, and it terrified me, of course. And I yelled out, my parents were separated, I was living with my dad, and I said, Dad, something's wrong with my heart. And he looked at me like, pardon? Like, that's not something you expect to hear from your little boy. And so he rushes over, he puts his hand on my heart, and he went white. He looked like he was going to throw up because he had never felt anything like that. And for me, that was very terrifying and a little bit important because my dad was the kind of guy who, if you forgot to put your dishes away, he'd get kind of mad. But if something big happened, he was the calmest guy in the room. He was very good at dealing with big stuff, serious stuff. So to see him look a little scared made me all the more scared. That day was the first day in a 4-year journey, trying to figure out what was wrong with my heart, and then once we figured it out, what we could do about it. It turned out I had something called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. It's a very rare nerve defect in your heart. The bad news is it cannot be fixed unless you have open heart surgery. The good news is it can be fixed if you have open heart surgery. And so I was presented with a challenge that was scary, but it at least presented a potential solution. And ultimately, I tried living with the illness for a few years, and I tried taking medication. It just didn't work. I was having those tachycardia. I was having them up to 2 times a week, and they were lasting up to 45 minutes a time. And when they happened, your blood pressure would be so distorted, you would feel dizzy, you would have to lie down. So it was a little bit like living like with epilepsy, where, this thing is happening, and right now I have to lie down, right here. You know, it was very debilitating and difficult. So that is me after open heart surgery in 1988, April of 1988. I'm at Toronto Sick Kids Hospital. I lived in Ontario at the time. I lived in Ontario at the time, at this point, hoping no one will hold that against me. Hey, I came this way, I came here. So obviously, that's a scary thing to go through. I was acutely aware that this was a serious surgery, that I could not live, that I could end up with a pacemaker for the rest of my life, and I came out unscathed, other than that. And this same boy, 2 weeks later. Now, I'd like you to tell me what is this is very sweet of you, your reaction. Tell me the first word you would describe to how that boy feels right now.
What's happy?
Yeah.
Looks happy.
Happy, relieved,
Yeah.
Exactly. So here's the interesting part. I have just gone through the biggest challenge of my life, and it turned out to be now that I'm 44, it's the second biggest challenge I've ever gone through. And it was serious and it was scary. And here I am, happy. Now there's a couple reasons. One, I was lucky that yes, I didn't get a pacemaker. The surgery worked and I was going to make a full recovery and I knew it by that point. But that little balloon I'm holding and what it says on it is hinting at something. You see, I didn't know it at the time, but I was experiencing an illness that had zero stigma attached to it. Not once in the previous months did anyone in my life say, "What the hell's wrong with you, Jason? Why don't you just try harder?" Not once did my teachers complain about the time I had to miss school. They found a way to accommodate. No one questioned my work ethic. No one did anything but give me empathy, love, support, and they rallied around me. That's why that smile is on my face, because I felt all those things. That taught me something that would later save my life in many ways. But it was a very, very important lesson with respect to understanding mental illness in respect to what we call physical illness. And I'll come to my disagreement with that term later. So I come through that. I'm 12 going on 13. And for the next several years, 13 years until I was 26, I had the kind of health that we all take for granted. The only thing I ever had was stuff like this, colds, flus, whatever, but otherwise I was healthy. My chest recovered, I have a scar this big on my chest, but otherwise you wouldn't know anything happened. My lifestyle was not limited. I had an amazing time in high school. I had an amazing time at university learning theater and speech communication, and then I had a fantastic time in my early years of my career. Life was good. I was healthy and I loved it, and honestly I remember thinking consciously, you know what? I had my big health scare. I had my big health challenge. I'm going to live until I'm 90 with no more problems. And it turned out not to be the case, but at least that was what I was thinking. And so I was a very happy-go-lucky man. And I still am, but the reason I was so happy-go-lucky was that I felt like I had kind of dodged a bullet. And if you read my book, there's a story about one of the people that I met in the hospital when I was having my heart surgery and how he didn't make it out. And so that was very clear in my mind that I might not have made it, let alone made it so healthy. So that's the way I live my life. And along the way, I met a girl who I fell in love with, and she wanted to go to McGill, and she did. And then I came and visited her, and I realized, wow, Montreal is a great town. I like this place. And so I moved. I moved from Toronto to Montreal in 2001. And her and I were happy. We were living together, and actually I was planning to propose. And I should say, I found a job as an Anglo from Toronto who did not speak French very well at all. I finally found a niche. Took me about a year, but I found a niche that worked. I ended up working for McGill University in fundraising, where they did not care that I don't speak French because all of the people I'm working with are their graduates, and most of them are across Canada and in the US. So I had this job that was stimulating and fun and interesting. I had great friends. I had a wonderful girl in my life. And then one day I woke up and I felt awful. And I thought maybe I had a virus, because the way I felt it was like a lack of energy at the cellular level. I just felt lethargic. I felt kind of dumb, like I had lost my mental acuity. I had no clue what was going on. I didn't even fathom the idea of a mental illness, but this went on for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And at around the 6 to 8 week point, my very brilliant girlfriend at the time, soon to be fiance, basically started to go, this doesn't seem right, started to do research, and she was the one who first raised the idea, this kind of looks like clinical depression, maybe moderate level. And I went, no, that doesn't happen to me, no. And here's why. Here's why my reaction was so negative and visceral to even the idea of a mental illness. It's because I grew up in this society, and this society teaches us to think mental illness is a character flaw, to think that mental illness is a weak person's illness. It's someone who's not trying hard enough, someone who's doesn't apply themselves well, whatever you want to call it. I thought those things, and my own mother had suffered from mental illness, specifically very severe clinical depression, for periods of her life, and I didn't understand it. Now, I didn't vilify her, and I didn't punish her for it, but I did stigmatize her in my head. I did think, Mom's not as strong as Dad. I did have those thoughts. And I was a hardworking, get it done kind of guy. And so when this was being presented to me as I might have a mental illness, to me that was like, no, I'm not like mom. I love my mom, but I'm not like her. I'm like that. I'm a hard worker. I'm going to do these things. And I really thought that these things went through my mind. It turns out I was part of the problem that I have dedicated the rest of my life to solving. I had fallen prey to stigma, and of course I applied that stigma to myself. The more sick I got, the more I resisted the concept that no, like, even if I thought maybe it's a mental illness, maybe it's depression, well, then I don't need treatment. I'm not taking any pills for this. No, I'm just going to eat well and work out, and I'm going to find a way through it. That idiotic thinking cost me 2.5 years of my life and risked many things. And it comes down to this. Mental illnesses are called mental because they affect the mind, the personality, the behavior, etc. But have you ever heard of the term brain illnesses? That exists in medicine. There's a category of brain illnesses. Alzheimer's is one of them. Dementia is one of them. So what's the difference between Alzheimer's and bipolar, or Alzheimer's and anxiety disorder, or Alzheimer's and clinical depression? Well, Alzheimer's changes behavior, of course, dramatically changes behavior. The difference is it's degenerative. And somewhere along the line, medicine decided to categorize everything like that differently. Now, because bipolar and clinical depression and anxiety disorder are not degenerative and they can't pinpoint the part in the brain, that we know it's neurotransmitters and we know all that stuff, but it's not quite as finite as or clear as dementia and Alzheimer's, it caused them to name it mental illnesses. And there's a problem with that name, a big problem. Now, we have to use it because it's what it is. And I don't shy from the name, but I do educate people on, when I say mental, you think mind. When you think mind, you think personality. If I say brain, you don't think personality at all. You think about the hunk of meat inside your skull. It's a brain, it's an organ. We are thinking about mental illness as though it's not physical illness, but it is. It is an illness of the brain and of the way the brain functions. And so my argument is physical and mental illnesses are fundamentally the same. They are failures of the way the body works that causes a set of symptoms. And those symptoms are beyond the control of the individual who has that illness and often need intervention, treatments, or others. But they're treated so differently in our society. The sooner we figure that out, and the sooner we all start realizing and acting accordingly, that is when stigma starts to go away. Not when we solve mental illness, because that is a very, very, very challenging puzzle to solve, but we will be much closer along that path. So, the thing about stigma and the way that it reared as self-stigma was very painful, because I'm a smart guy, and I could tell as the symptoms got worse. I mean, I would have moments where I would be looking in the mirror going, what is wrong with you, Jason? Like, why is this happening? And I just couldn't get beyond the stigma. The stigma was like a straitjacket that was holding me in and holding me back and limiting any logical reactions. Now, I use an analogy with my audiences a lot. It's a little gross, but it's so effective. Listen to this. If starting tomorrow, any one of you woke up and suddenly had this violent, awful nausea, and you ran to the bathroom and vomited, and then felt fine. You're like, well, that was weird. Do I have the flu? What's going on? Do I have a fever? No other symptoms. Just one sudden pang of nausea and one episode of vomiting. Then it happens again 2 days later. And then again 2 days later. How long do you go before you are knocking on the door of a doctor saying, whoa, something's wrong, figure it out? What do you think? Frankly, I hate throwing up, so it's like a week and a half for me. I would lose my mind doing that. That would be very difficult. Would you agree that none of us would endure that for months straight, ever, without seeking medical attention? But yet, all of the symptoms of mental illness, whether it's anxiety disorder or depression or bipolar, we often do that. And that's what I did. I tried to just live through it and soldier on and hope it got better. But this is what happened. I have one more point I need to make here, is that this is a fundamental undercurrent about stigma, and it did apply to me in the self-stigma that I had. We are scared of, or at the very least, if you're not afraid of it, you're uncomfortable with mental illness. When you're uncomfortable with something, you tend to hold it at bay, and you tend to categorize it, stigmatize it, discriminate against it, or whatever. So that is a fundamental reality that if we're going to improve how we respond to mental illness, we need to get over that. Illnesses are illnesses. You know what else is uncomfortable? Watching someone die of cancer. That's awful. And it's awful for them, it's awful for their family members, but guess what? We don't stigmatize the person who has cancer because we recognize it's beyond their control. That's the way we have to go with mental illnesses. So when I finally got over stigma, and I will go into how and why soon, but I just want you to know that this is the fundamental first step of any person who's on a path to recovery, and it's owning your illness. And by owning your illness, I just mean fully accepting, I have this thing, fully understanding what this thing is, and then doing the research as to what can I do, what controls do I have, what inputs and outputs can I have any say in that will increase the chances of me being well. When you own a mental illness, that doesn't mean you will automatically live well with it. That doesn't mean your treatments will automatically work, but it does mean that the chances go up a lot. Very, very, very important. I made a decision once I got over it that, well, this thing sucks, I don't like it, but I have it, and I better figure it out. And that's why I went to AMI back in 2005. That's why I went to them to learn about, that was my way of starting to own it. So once I accepted it, and I started owning it, well, I quickly learned that, hey, there's something I'm not doing that I could be doing, and that was tracking my illness. And the charts that I'm going to show you actually become a really useful way to tell you the story of how the illness presented, and so I'll walk you through these. All of them from 2005 back to this one were done retrospectively, and were tough to do because some of them were multiple years old, and I had to go and think about what was I like in that first period of that year, and I had to ask people, and I really did a lot of work to get it done. So none of this insight that you're seeing, I didn't have it until 2005, after I was diagnosed. So from the time of my open heart surgery to this here, this is what I would call baseline. I put something on the chart to show something rather than nothing, but basically, I'm right here, I'm good. I am not experiencing anything in the mania, and I'm not experiencing anything in the depression, and people say to me, why do you say baseline and not normal? And my answer is always because normal is kind of a bad word. It's not a bad word, but it's a lazy word. And here's why. How much sleep does everybody here get in a night? Hold your hand up if you get less than 6. Hold your hand up if you get less than 7, or between 6 and 7, between 7 and 8, between 8 and 9, there we go. Nice, completely random spattering around the room. I'm around 7 to 8. What's a normal amount of sleep?
8.
Yeah. Here's the thing. There is an advised frame of reference for sleep, but normal is not applicable. If you're healthy getting 5 hours a night, I know lots of people who are, that does not mean that you're manic. It does not mean that you're hypomanic. It does not mean you're not living well. You just happen to have a body that doesn't need more than 5 hours, and that's the way it works. Some people need 10. They're not lazy. That's what they need to recharge. So my point is, baseline is your normal, and this was my normal. The way that the illness first presented in 2002 was exactly like this. Now I'd like you to notice something. I'm going to go back. Baseline is that thickness. Look at the thickness after the depression. Once bipolar disorder initiated, for whatever reason, in my brain and body, and I told you all about how happy I was and how good things were, because I happen to be one of those, it's very common, but a lot of people don't think it is, people whom I didn't have a trigger. There was no trigger whatsoever. There was no stressor, there was no negative thing going on in my life that made me tumble down into this illness. It just happened, just showed up one day. So the way I experienced it was mild to moderate depression for those first couple months. When I came out of that depression, and every transition you will see for the rest of these slides were always overnight. I went to bed here, and I woke up there. Every time. It was unbelievable. So the first time it happened, imagine what I thought. I am barely registering as mildly hypomanic. Do you think I knew that? Does anyone know what hypomania even presents like? Like, what is it? What are the symptoms of hypomania, mild hypomania? You have a little bit more energy.
Basically running on adrenaline. You don't feel any urge for sleep, and then you're up for 30 hours.
That would be mania, full mania, not hypomania. So hypomania, mild, is mild mania. So this is
20 hours.
no, you still sleep, you still sleep. So here's the thing, and this is very tricky. If you are actually diagnosing, going by the way the medical journals thank you, the way all of that is written, if you actually look at hypomania, it is essentially the way a person behaves when they are type A, having a good day, maybe had a coffee. It is very, very, very mild when it's mild hypomania, and it's hard to read. Yes?
Have you ever done a different example? Or out of nowhere, out of the blue, you just want to clean the entire house? Or is that still mania?
It's still a baby.
We're going to come to that. We're going to come to that, but that's getting closer to mania. Yeah.
Okay.
Hypomania is as think of a really healthy state, but your need for sleep goes down just a little bit. So I was 7 to 8. Suddenly I was 6 to 7. Right? It was very mild. It was very minimal, the difference. And the energy output goes up from, if your average energy out of a scale of 1 to 10 is 8, and what you're describing is a 10 to a 10.5, it's like 8.5. It's just a little bit more. So it's really hard to diagnose, is what I'm trying to say. And I had no clue during that year that this was happening. But it was the indicator that bipolar had occurred, because I left my baseline at the beginning of 2002, and you'll see when I got back to it. It was a while. So I continued on in what I thought was a healthy state all the way through until July of 2003. Now, let me ask you this. How cool is Montreal in the summer? It's like a pretty great town to be in, right? There's so many things going on. The West Island out here is amazing. I now live in St. Lazare. I absolutely love the summer here. It is a great place to live. And here I was experiencing the deepest depression that I had had to date. And I had no clue why. I still liked my job. I was now engaged. I got engaged right here. I was now engaged. Life was good. And all of a sudden I'm depressed. And this time, moderate depression. It was everything I described to you before, but a lot worse. That lethargy, that mental acuity that was gone, that I had trouble working, I had trouble getting things done. Everything was hard. Everything. Making a tea was hard. And it was awful and it was confusing. But when I went through 2 months in the summertime of that was the first time that I suppose my fiance said to me, okay, I really think this is clinical depression. We still didn't know about the bipolar yet. And I started to have to face that these symptoms are kind of looking like what she says, but I still don't like it. So I still didn't do anything about it. And then I came out of it. Interestingly, and I don't know why, I didn't get more hypomanic. I just went right back to where I was, but still more than my baseline. And the way I know that is my sleep patterns. The way I describe it is it's like a current of energy, and this will ring a bell, a current of energy that does not go away until the state that you're in ends. And so for me, the current was really mild, but it was there. It was there all the time. As you can see in December, it got back down, and then it went deeper. So when I hit my first severe depression, I'd like to describe what it was and how it felt. It actually hit me, I woke up, and I felt so bad I was going to not go to work. But here's the funny thing, it was the end of December. I had one last day, and it was a half day, and then we were going to go to a pub with our team and just have a celebratory Christmas, kind of Christmas party, and then we were all going to go home at 5. And I thought, I can do that, right? I feel awful, but I can do that. So I went to work, and I felt really bad, and I did not want to be there, and I had trouble talking to people, and you've been listening to me for long enough to recognize I really don't have trouble talking. So for me to have trouble talking with people is a problem. And I go to this party, and it was on Crescent Street, or Bishop maybe, and we're at a pub, and I'm looking around, and remember, life is good. I'm about to enter a 2-week Christmas holiday. That was one of the great things about working for McGill University. Great holidays. I should have been feeling awesome, and I wanted to hide under one of the benches so that nobody would talk to me. I left early, I didn't say goodbye to anybody, and I walked down St. Catherine Street. It was snowing, it was beautiful, it was the beginning of my Christmas holidays, and I felt darker and more depressed than I've ever felt. And for me, depression didn't feel so much like sadness. It felt more like numbness, like I was in a plexiglass box, and I could see the world, but I couldn't touch it, and I couldn't feel it, and no one could reach me. It was so solitary and so terrifying and so lonely. And that is the image. I spent some time trying to find an image that captured what I felt when I went through depression, and that's it. You're there, you have no vision of your future, literally your future meaning 2 hours from now. You have no real clarity of your past, you're in a fog, and you're alone. That, for me, is depression. And then I entered my bipolar year, 2004. So that depression was bad, and it continued. And where you see these two periods that relieve that depression, it wasn't actual relief, it was because I was trying to work through this depression. And the only reason I was able to work through a severe depression was, I'm not joking, flat out ignorance. I didn't know what I was facing, and I just forced myself to work through it, because this was back when I still believed I could solve this on my own. The relief came because I took a week of work off. And then I went back to work for a week, and I took another week of work off, because I had vacation time. And those weeks I thought I felt better, but it was just because I was able to be alone and not go to work. I wasn't better. So now I become hypomanic again, and now the hypomania leaves the realm of difficult to notice and enters the realm closer to what you were describing of, oh, you can notice. Suddenly, I'm not sleeping 6 hours a night, I'm sleeping 4 hours a night. In April of 2004, there was a sighting, a very rare sighting, and that sighting was Jason Finucan jogging in the morning on the mountain. I hate jogging. I've always hated running. Always. In my whole life, never, before or after that, have I ever run unless someone was chasing me. And here I was jogging, I had to burn energy. I was waking up early, running for 2 hours, then going to work for the day. I was having that sense of like spontaneous, hey, like you said, I'm gonna clean my apartment, on a Saturday morning, and I'm gonna spend 6 hours doing it when it really only needed 2, but I'll go really hardcore about it. I did experience that, and that was when I started to go, okay, this is weird. It's not just I don't feel depressed. It's not just I feel better than depression. It's something new is happening here. That is when, when I had my second consecutive summer in Montreal of depression, my fiance really did her research, and that's when she presented to me the very clear, like, you may have bipolar disorder, this is a problem. And I still was resisting it, and then I did something that I look back on and I find it so funny and so curious. I'm a 28-year-old man, 9-year-old man, and I'm going through all this, and in the face of really clear evidence by a very smart woman who's done her research that I might have bipolar disorder, I say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see a psychologist, because I want to mind, I had some pretty serious trauma as a kid, and I want to mind all that and make sure that that's not causing this. And the only reason I did it was because I was afraid of the diagnosis of a mental illness, and I was afraid of medical treatment for mental illness. I chose a long, laborious, and embarrassing course of talk therapy. Not that talk therapy is bad, talk therapy is great, but I chose it just purely to avoid all of this. It is ridiculous to do that. I still can't believe it. And the woman, I don't even remember her name. All I know is I saw her in the Seaforth building, and she did something for me that was one of the greatest gifts I've ever received in my life. After 6 months of seeing me every other week, she thoroughly let me talk through all this stuff, and many of the things I shared with her are in that book. She sat me down and said, okay, she goes, I'm going to start this by saying I am a psychologist, so I cannot offer a diagnosis of a clinical mental illness. That said, I have 78 patients, and you are by far the least in need of my services. You are the most organized, emotionally organized person I've ever met. You've dealt with all the crap that you went through. You've figured out how to handle it and live through it. What you are going through is not because of emotional trauma. What I believe you have is bipolar disorder, and you need to see a psychiatrist, and you need to see one right now. And I just, that was when I finally listened. And that was when stigma finally started to fade. Not completely, but enough that I did go see a psychiatrist. And the way I did it is it was in the summer there, I was supposed to go to work one day, and my bus route took me in front of the General on Côte-des-Neiges, and I just got off and walked into Côte-des-Neiges Hospital, the General Hospital, sat in front of the triage nurse and said, I think I'm severely depressed, and I'd like to see a psychiatrist. And she said, are you suicidal? I said, no. And she said, okay, wait over there. And would you believe, I still can't believe this happened, I only waited 2 hours, and I was in front of a psychiatrist. And that psychiatrist gave me a 2-hour consultation and ultimately said, you may be bipolar, but because I've never been fully manic, we can't give you that diagnosis. You definitely are experiencing clinical depression. Here's 3 months off work, and you need to start taking an antidepressant. And she prescribed something called Defect. I started Defect in August, September. It became, we're gonna get there, it became effective in October when you see me come up there. Now interestingly, at first, I didn't have any more hypomania than before. At first, the effects only treated the depression and brought me kind of back to that mild to moderate hypomania. But then this happened. This depression, you know the Al Gore climate change thing where he's on like a lift and the graph just keeps going up and up and up? I wish I could take this and have it go all the way through the floor. That depression, I can honestly tell you that I have no concept of how I could have survived that depression if it lasted for months, let alone years. I mentioned before that I had never been suicidal. I never was suicidal. I don't consider that a badge of honor. I consider that a fluke. It's a circumstantial thing. I just happened not to have suicidal thoughts. I was lucky. But I can tell you, if that depression lasted for 3 straight months, I don't know what I would have done. I don't think I could have survived it. It was 18 hours a day of virtually nothing but sleep, watching movies, and not talking. I couldn't do anything else. Leaving the house was a once in a 5-day period, and it was big. Like, I mean going for a short walk. It was a terrible depression. So I saw the doctor in that state. And he said, well, the effects obviously had been effective. You clearly are severely depressed. We're going to increase the dosage of Effexor. I am not vilifying that doctor. He was making the best guess he could in the year 2005. Wouldn't be done now. But the Effexor did exactly what you see. I went from the deepest depression I'd ever been in all the way to the beginning of a severe manic episode overnight. And it was the medication that bumped me into that. Now I have bipolar, so I was going to be manic eventually. This just fast-tracked me to it. So what mania, severe mania feels like, that's when you don't sleep. I didn't sleep, in my case, for 6 straight days. 6 straight days. I didn't stop moving, talking, writing, driving, getting angry for 6 straight days. Ultimately, my poor fiancée, she's here in Montreal, and I wake up in this state. And my family, as I said, I'm from Ontario. They live in Orillia, Ontario, an hour and a half north of Toronto. I woke up, it's 4:30 in the morning, and I have a torrent of energy. When I described mild hypomania as like a little trickle of energy, this was incredible. I felt like I could shoot lightning out of my hands. And I just had this sense of like, I need to do, and I need to see my family. And I packed a bag, and she woke up to me packing a bag. Remember, I was catatonically depressed hours before. Excuse me. And here she is seeing me in this manic state. And she tried to stop me, but there's nothing she could do. I just said, I love you, but I gotta see my family goodbye. And I got in the car and I drove to Orillia. It just went. So for the next 6 days, she's on the phone with services here and with my family there, trying to get my family to understand that I am in a manic phase and I need treatment. They're not understanding because they don't understand. They didn't have the education to know. And they're saying, well, we'll just watch him. He seems, he's weird and things are, he's doing weird things, but it should be okay. They didn't know I wasn't sleeping. I was lying about that. I was pretending like I was going to bed, then sneaking out. And my big thing to get through the nights was funny things like I'd go to Tim Hortons in Orillia. There's 12 of them in a small town. It's ridiculous. And I would go to Tim Hortons and borrow their night, they call placemats. And I'd ask the guy for a pen, and I would just write and write and write. Oh, I wrote ideas for screenplays. I wrote ideas for novels. I wrote ideas for businesses that were gonna make me $1 million. This was my, like, wasn't a manifesto because it wasn't, I didn't view it as one thing. It was a very valuable document. There ended up being about 25 pages that I filled with scribble that I can barely read. A couple of those, I think one of those pages is published in that book. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's clearly the disjointed ramblings of a mind that is fragmenting. Now, I never lost touch with reality, but I made it 6 days, and then I was hospitalized. I believe if I had been left alone for 7 or 8 or 9 days, I was going to lose all touch with everything. I wasn't going to know who I was or where I was. But at this point, I was thankfully but short of that. And just as I view it as circumstantial and fortunate that I didn't have suicidal thoughts, it was also circumstantial and fortunate that I didn't spend money, cheat on my spouse or my fiance. I didn't engage in risky behaviors. I didn't do a lot of the things people do. And I don't know why. I mean, I'm so glad. Here's the thing, I told you I worked for McGill University as a fundraiser. Guess what I had in my wallet? Because I did a lot of work for them and a lot of travel. I had an Amex that had an unlimited purchase amount. I could have purchased a bloody car on my work Amex and then would have had to deal with that afterwards. I didn't do it. Don't know why. Didn't gamble, didn't do any of those things. But what I did do was steadily lose touch with what was going on and reality, and my family finally agreed with my fiance, and they involved the police, and they had to put me in Ontario, it's called a Form 1, where you were forcibly admitted. It was a 2-week stay, but as bad as and difficult as that was, the beauty of it is that I was finally diagnosed as bipolar disorder. The doctor in Ontario wasn't critical of how I'd been treated in Montreal, but he did say it was a mistake, and it was like he said, we're just now realizing that these drugs are causing this result. It's unfortunate he didn't know, and so he got me off Effexor, put me on lithium. And what you see here, from here to there, to there, is me. I've come down from the manic episode, which is really tough. I am now depressed after the manic episode, and I'm waiting for the lithium to work. It seems like it's going to work, and then I keep falling back down. It seems like it's going to work, and I keep falling back down. And this was the last nail in the coffin for stigma for me. Because remember, guys, I started this journey with you at 2002. This is 2005. 2.5 years. I have doggedly, determinedly tried to fix this illness myself. And one day I'm taking 5 pills of lithium, and I see my doctor and I say, look, I'm still depressed. And he says, okay, I've done your blood work. You actually can go up 1 more dosage amount of lithium, and I believe that will get you into the therapeutic range for lithium. And I said, okay, I'll try. At this point, I'm willing to try whatever I'm told. And I went home and I took 6 little white pills instead of 5. And I woke up the next day, and the first words out of my mouth were, I feel like me. Not I feel better, not I have energy. I felt like me for the first time in 2.5 years. That was when I went, my God, obviously this is a chemical imbalance in my brain that was resolved by a treatment. It's flat out too much in your face. And as soon as I really understood that, stigma faded away like dark fades away when you shine a light at it. It just disappeared. And from that minute on, from June of 2005 on, I had overcome stigma, and I had made a decision to own my illness, to learn about my illness, to do everything I could to become someone who manages it well. And by the time I finished that year, all these charts that you see now were done. I also started tracking my sleep. Back then there were no apps and iPhones to use, so I did it in Excel, created an Excel spreadsheet and filled it out every day and every month, and figured out that, you know what, I know I need about 7.5 hours, so if I see a drop in sleep that is significant and lasts, I might be hypomanic. If I see a massive increase, I might be depressed. I just wanted data to help me understand what was going on with me. And so I continued like that. And I had a really good run. Oh, I always forget this slide's coming. This is my best attempt, real tough to summarize mania in one picture, but that's my best attempt, especially because I spent so many nights awake and alone. So this, though, is a really good photographic representation of what feeling like yourself after 2.5 years of hell is. Anyone who's ever been sick with anything, when you feel that you're well again, you've recovered, you're like, yes, I feel free. And for me, I knew I wasn't free of bipolar, but I did know that I finally found a way to at least manage the symptoms in a way that were livable. And that felt like freedom to me at the time. And it still does. So 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I made it a good number of years just on lithium. Now here's the trick. I took it every day. I never resented it. Not once. And the way I didn't resent it, honestly, was because I looked at that pill and I thought to myself, how many people out there have an illness like this and they never find a treatment that works? I found a treatment that works. It's like the open heart. I didn't resent the open heart surgery. I was relieved that there was an operation that could fix this problem. I was relieved that there was a medication that was effective and allowed me to live a better life. And so that is why I didn't resent it, and I was so compliant, and I took it, and I've always been compliant with it. My simple rule is, as long as my doctors, whom I am very regularly in touch with, tell me that the medication I'm taking is not hurting my body. As many of you may know, lithium is not the easiest drug on your kidneys, so I see a nephrologist regularly, and so far so good. She's telling me that I'm fine. She said, honestly, the numbers show that if I didn't know you were on lithium, I wouldn't know. They're that close to what they should be at my age. So I never resented it, I never had a problem with it, but suddenly, I had a weird year. It's like, Now, I wasn't loving my job at the point. I wasn't at McGill anymore, still in fundraising. I had some stresses, so I kind of wrote this year off to just, you know what? Everybody has bad years, and maybe I just had a stressful year. It wasn't that big of a deal. But I tracked it, and the data gave me information. But then that happened. And as soon as I started to get to here, I realized, no, this is worse. So I saw my doctor, showed him this data, and I went, I think I'm relapsing a little bit. And he said, look, he said, Jason, honestly, you are one of the most receptive people I've ever met to lithium. He said, the fact that it treated your depression and your mania is kind of a miracle. It really isn't that good at that. He said, it's really good at the mania, but it's not really an antidepressant. It's a mood stabilizer, and often people need a secondary medication to deal with the depression. So his first thought was, let's try increasing the lithium just to see if that works. We did. The side effects went off the charts. The side effects were bad, very bad and unlivable, and we quickly realized, and it didn't help anyway, we quickly realized that wasn't the right thing. So right around the end of April, he said to me, okay, we're going to dial back the lithium now. We actually reduced the dosage quite a bit to save my kidneys a bit, and he added a new drug, and it's called Cipralex, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. It is an antidepressant that is very effective with people who are bipolar, and it does not instigate a manic episode. Incredibly rare for it to do so, right? Very rare. It can, but very, very rare. So we watched it, and I started taking it, and the side effects were horrible for 2 weeks, and then they went away, and I'm kind of breezing past that point, but I do want to stress this. If you are with somebody, or if you are dealing with it yourself, the medications that we have to take sometimes to treat a mental illness have pretty awful side effects sometimes, like sometimes really unlivable. The thing is that you can't ascertain that until you've been on it for a couple of months at least, until your body has figured it out. So when I was in the first, I can tell you right now, if I was told, oh no, the side effects you're feeling right now in week 2, they're going to be there forever, I would have said, get me off this drug, I can't do it. I can't. I hated the side effects. But they went away, and I was told they would. And they went from unbearable to bearable to hardly noticeable. And I was like, all right, I can do this. And so I clicked along, and suddenly you see that little drop off there. And you're not going to believe this is actually what the medical term is, which makes me laugh. It's called a poop out effect. It's when a new medication has been, and it could be for all kinds of medications. New medication's prescribed to you, it works at this level of effectiveness, and then for some reason, it just kind of poops out. It just doesn't work anymore at that dosage for you. And so you need to increase the dosage slightly. So that's what he did. He increased the dosage by very little, and it instantly worked again. Continued to work until when it pooped out again, and I needed one more dose increase. But I still remember he started me low, and he brought me up to basically average level dosage. And then I had another nice run. 18, 19.
Wow.
I haven't done one for 20 yet. So, this is not perfection. But what this is this is living with an illness and finding a way to keep the major symptoms at bay. So I'm going to tell you now about the things that don't make this chart. This chart is to record clinical symptoms of a mental illness that last. In my opinion and in the research I have done, in order to determine, are you experiencing the symptoms of a mental illness, you need to see them last for at least 2 weeks. Because we all can experience sudden, minor things in our life. We've all seen times where we're really anxious for a little while, we don't know why, and it turns out it's something else. So you don't want to jump onto the, oh, you're anxious, you have anxiety. Oh, you're down, oh, you have depression. That's dangerous to do that. So the way that I do it is, it makes on this chart if it lasts for a week or two. And I go down to a week because I have a history and I have an established pattern. But it doesn't make it to this chart if it's like 2-3 days, right? So I have had multiple times in the last 5 years that were straight lines there, that were baselines. I've had multiple times where I wake up and I feel what I would describe as almost mild depression. Like not quite, it's just a little lighter than that. And it lasts for 1, 2, 3, or 4 days. So far it has not gone over 4 days. It's happened 6 times. And I've talked to my doctor about it and we've looked at it. The answer is, that's just part of the deal, right? It's not easy, it's something you gotta watch out for and, live with and figure a way around. But those they're not fun, but they're not debilitating, life-ruining episodes. And so that's why I recorded on that. So this isn't about trying to be perfect or live perfect. This is just trying to minimize the damage that this illness is causing you. That's all I'm trying to do, and that's all I'm trying to help others do. So the first thing I say to people is, if you want more control or a measure of more control over an illness that is as difficult as a mental illness, track it. And nowadays, oh my gosh, have you ever heard of eMoods? eMoods, it's an app.
No.
It's so good. I just, honestly, I got into it about a year ago. It's, I'm pulling it up here. It's not reading my fingerprints. eMoods.
Mood.
No, moods. So small e, capital MOODS. And here we go. So I just want to show you, look at the data there. And it's so easy. Every day I open up this app and I record a bunch of data points. So how am I feeling? Like, is my energy good? And it has variations like, hours of sleep, and then it has depression, elevated, irritability, anxiety, energy level, activity level, and all of those you can say you are mild, moderate, and high, right? So you're looking for low on the first several, and then higher on the energy, obviously, you want to have good energy, and then activity level will change depending on your lifestyle. I record my weight, and I record that I took my pills. And so things like that, right? Like those types of things they do a few things actually. They give you a sense of empowerment over your own illness, but they also, and if you're helping someone else through an illness and maybe they're unable to do this, you could do it for them. It gives you data points so that when you see your doctor, you can say, look, for the last 6 months, this is exactly how many times I felt this way. Very, very, very useful to psychiatrists to be able to help. So I really recommend the power of that.
It's eMood.
eMoods with an S. MOODS. If you go to the App Store and just type EMOODS, like mood, like you're in a good mood, a bad mood, you'll find it. It's and it was free. It's a free app. So, and I should say that when I downloaded that, I downloaded 4, and I just did my research on the App Store, and I was like, these 4 look good. I downloaded all 4, and I tried all 4 for a week, and it became quickly clear to me that eMoods was the best one for me. And so I recommend, a little bit of thought put into it as well. But it's really, it's really, it's more about the decision to commit to owning your own illness and saying, I'm going to be a part of the solution. I know for me that I don't view it as a coincidence that the day that I said that within 6 months I had found a treatment that worked, and I figured out some things that were allowing me to maintain that. You know, that definitely, I believe, was really helpful and was an integral part of it. The other things that I do that I think are very important, I mean, sleep is absolutely vital. You must maintain as close as possible to your average sleep schedule. The way I handle that is, let's say my average is 7.5. If I have one night where I just sinus cold, I can't sleep, and I only get 6 hours, I make sure that the next night I try to get an extra hour. And the night after that, I try to get it. Like, I don't let it go 3 nights in a row of way less sleep than I normally need. I just don't do that. Because to me, I'm not gonna run that. That's the same reason I take my medication. Because to not take my medication, and I'm not saying I take it absolutely every single day, I try to. I am compliant to a pretty ridiculous degree, like probably 99.5%. And the times I don't take it, if I'm not feeling well with like my stomach, sometimes the medication, lithium in particular, will make my stomach upset if it's already upset. So some nights I'll be like, I'm gonna not take that. But honestly, it's very rare. And that's the thing, is it's never about perfection. It's about trying to get to that place where you're really the leader in the team that is managing your illness. And if you are unable to be the leader, like when I'm in a severe depression, I am not a leader anymore, you need caregivers that can help you with that. I know a lot of you are caregivers. And when people say to me, what can I do? You know, I feel a ton of empathy for everyone in my life who had to watch me go through all this, because I recognize how awful that was for them. Not because I put them out, but because they cared about me and they were watching me suffer, and there was nothing they could do to make the suffering stop in that moment. So what I say to caregivers is, the most valuable thing you can do is consistency, is reason. Like reason, in other words, when the person is losing their reason because they're manic or they're depressed, you have to be the voice of reason to remind them, and even coming up with ways to say, like, you know what, when you're well, I want you to record a selfie video that says, if I end up doing this, this, and this, I absolutely want you to do this, that, and that. And then when the person's manic, just show it to them, right? They may not buy it in the instant, but it's another framework of reality of this person's trying to help me, all of that. And so that is definitely a big part of it. I'm gonna be making sure that we have time, so I'm gonna wrap up very soon. I just want to show you something. Okay, really quickly, guys. Stigma. Don't forget, stigma is an attitude. Discrimination is an action. A lot of people think of stigma as an action. It's not. So you can, if I stay to this room, I challenge you to be stigma-free when it comes to mental illness. You could, let's say you have a couple of minor discriminatory actions that you have towards people that have mental illness, and you stop those. You think you've gotten rid of the stigma, but you haven't, because stigma is latent. It's in your brain in the way that you think. It's very similar to sexism and racism. It's very deep. And so you need to find the root of it if you really want to get rid of it. And so I have this thing. It's really effective to show you why stigma is so easy to fall into as a trap in our society. I would like you to just, we're in a small room, just blurt it out. I'd like you to give me stigma-filled, negative, discriminatory words describing or about mental illness that you know. And I'll go first because it's a very strange request. Psycho.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Lunatic.
Yeah. Keep going fast.
Schizo.
Schizo.
Weird.
Weird.
Lazy.
Lazy. I love that. That one always comes up. Yeah.
Out of control.
Out of control.
Mental.
Yeah. If I pushed you for 5 minutes and I wrote everyone down, I've done this before, I could get 100 words out of you. We all have learned these words from pop culture, TV, news, movies, etc. We have been fed them. Now, I'm going to ask you the same question. Give me stigma-filled, negative, discriminatory words about cancer. Good luck.
Horrible.
That's not discriminatory or stigma-filled.
Empathetic.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Now I would like to make a connection, because I'm making an analogy between cancer and mental illness, and it is imperfect, but it does illuminate something. And this is, for me, what really gives me the most hope about my vision for a future without stigma. I'm sure some of you know this, but most in our society have no clue that women with breast cancer were discriminated against and stigmatized in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Significant social stigma. There were 0 rallies, denim days, walks for the cure, pink ribbons. There was no sense of social support or rallying. If my dad has clear memories of his friend's mother being diagnosed with the big C, and they wouldn't talk about it, and she went home and was alone for a month, and then she committed suicide by hanging herself in her basement. She did this not because her life was coming to an end. She did this because she was desperately alone, and she was facing this horrible challenge without any support. Now, the point I'm making is, how did we go from there with breast cancer to where breast cancer is today? Which, could you imagine today someone applying stigma towards a woman with breast cancer? It would be laughable. It would be so comically out of the norm and out of our cultural sort of acceptances, and it would be confusing and no one would let it happen. That's the point, I believe. The way it happened was very simple. Women started talking out. Other women started agreeing. Women started forming support groups. Then there started to become more awareness, and that led to more education, which led to more awareness and more talking out, and then it became more of a public thing. Then the news picked up on it, and then finally the medical industry started to realize, well, we better do something about this, and they started doing research and on and on. And so why can't we do the same thing with mental illnesses? Why can't we transition from a place where a room like this struggles to find stigma-filled words to describe mental illness? Right now we have a ton of them. So when I say all this, it's to say, if you want to be free of stigma, it's a discipline. You have to choose to not let that be the case. You have to say to yourself, and it means you have to help others around you. Because you will hear people say things unintentionally that are stigma-filled. They will refer to, one of my biggest frustrations out there is mental health issue. Here's why. If someone in this room has never had a mental illness and does not currently have a mental illness, but they're struggling with a mental health issue because they're going through a divorce, or their spouse is struggling with alcoholism, so their mental health is degraded in that moment, that is an accurate use of the term mental health issue. You have an issue with your mental health. In the same way, an obese person has an issue with their physical health. I do not have a mental health issue. I have an illness called bipolar disorder. And when someone calls it, it's not about me taking it personally, it adds to the stigma. It adds to the, oh, it's just a mental health issue. No, it's an illness. It's something significant, and you need to face it that way. So that's one of the ways that our language is, we really need to be careful how we do these things and how we say these things, and even how we say it to the people we're trying to support, right? Because sometimes you can unintentionally use loose or lazy language with people like that, and it does marginalize them. And I saw that for years. I mean, I came up with this little exercise I just did with you purely out of experience and watching how many people referred to my illness incorrectly. And then it occurred to me that probably 90% of those people were doing it unintentionally. They weren't malicious, they weren't trying to hurt me, but we don't change something this big unless we really clarify it. And that's why movements like what's happening right now with the Me Too movement are so important, because that movement is shifting the paradigm of what is accepted in the way women, in this case, are treated by men. And so all of these social changes are, they don't happen overnight, right? It takes time and it takes effort, and it takes a lot of people thinking with clarity and recognizing it for what it is. The other way that I often say to people, I do have friends who say, I don't know what to say to someone with an illness like yours. And I get it. I get why they would think that way. But I say to them, The most powerful way that I got over stigma was connecting my open heart surgery, my heart problem, I should say, my heart problem with my bipolar. Because I don't think I said this earlier, that I realized very viscerally what would have happened if at 26, instead of the onset of bipolar symptoms, my heart problem had come back. What if the tachycardia had come back? Could have. I mean, it's physically possible, right? What would I have done? Would I have tried to soldier on for 2.5 years? Would I have hid my symptoms from everyone in my life and at my work? Would I have been afraid of what everyone would have thought of me? Would I have had any stigma whatsoever? Of course not. I would have said, oh my God, my heart problem's back. I would have told my boss, told my doctor, and done everything I could to get treatment right away. Instead of 2.5 years of flailing about trying to figure it out on my own. That's a really powerful way. So I just say to people, imagine that they have any physical illness, anything. Literally, they were hit by a car. It could be an injury. It could be an illness like cancer. It could be anything that you know and understand. Imagine that that's what they have, and what would you say? You would show empathy. You would say, I'm sorry this happened to you. You would say, how can I help? Right? All of those things would come to you instantly, but they don't come to you with mental illness because we're afraid. We're afraid of offending, all of that kind of stuff. And I have rewarded everyone in my life who has spoken frankly with me and asked questions, even if they did so in language that was stigmatized. You know, even if they said something that was a little unintentionally rude, I have always started off by saying, that's amazing that you're even asking that question. Thanks for asking, let me answer it. And then, by the way, try not to say it that way, say it this way, and here's why. It's not a judgment, it's not a scolding, it's just educate, 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 right? We need to do it in our lives all the time. I'm going to stop now because I promised I wanted to save a good full 15, maybe 20 minutes if you need it for questions. And I know there might be questions from people online. And then after that, we'll have some time to, if anybody wants a book and wants me to sign it, we'll do that. And that way we're out of the library when they need to close. So let me just first say thank you so much for your attention and your understanding of my horrible voice. And really please, as you can see, I'm not shy about what it is I've shared. So if there's anything you wish to ask me about anything I've shared or anything else related to this topic, please feel free. Thank you.